Hey folks, got a BatRep for you. World War II action, Panzer Grenadier Deluxe. It was a full game. It's, by the rules, this is about 1,500 points aside, which is pretty moderate-sized game, really. There's like a couple companies on each side, so it's pretty decent. Here's the layout. I'll probably film the rest of this BatRep as I go along and put up a full BatRep probably next week, showing off the whole game. But this is the situation. There's two objectives. There's that bridge down there being held by some Fallschirmjäger. They captured that during the night and threw the Americans back across the stream, which are on this side of the stream over here. And the Americans control the second objective of the game, which is that village over there on the left. They have some troops stationed there currently. That's what it looks like. So there's two objectives in this game. It's a 15-turn battle. Whoever controls both objectives at the end of 15 turns will win the battle decisively. I've played this scenario before with Flames of War, so this ought to be interesting, playing it with a different set of rules. Down on this side, the south edge, there's a here battle group coming to basically take the village from the Americans, as well as link up with the Fallschirmjäger. We'll see if they can do that. Also, the Americans also have reinforcements coming. The rest of their battle group that's currently on the board, which will be deployed on that side, which is the western side, I believe, of the battlefield, up to the edge of that village. So anywhere from the left side of the village to the right. So that whole zone there is where the reinforcements will arrive. So that's a look at the battlefield, folks. I get some close-ups, troops here. Those represent squads. Each base is a squad or a section. I got some bazookas attached. I got some recon elements for the Americans. There's a company HQ on the battlefield, that little big square there. Americans also have some 60-centimeter mortars back here, and a section of 81-millimeter mortars over there. There's the battle group headquarters there on the big base, and there's the defenders of the village awaiting the here. And over here we've got the bridge defenders, which are the Fallschirmjäger. Those little white markers indicate they're hidden. I'm going to be using a modified version of the hidden rules from Panzer Grenadier, because I am playing this solo. And all the German Fallschirmjäger are hidden, as you can see, except for this MG42 up on top of the hill. Yeah, that's the situation, folks. This stream will be difficult for vehicles to cross. In fact, there's lots of difficult terrain on this battlefield. See all kinds of woods and stuff going on. Here's some remnants from the previous night's battle. Some ruined buildings and stuff. So yeah, it should be pretty fun. I did roll initiative for the first turn of the game, and that was the result. And just to fill you in on how the rules work. Roll for initiative. Both sides roll d6. They add +1 in this case for the time period an army is concerned. Both the Americans and the Germans in 1944 will add a +1 for their initiative. And the green is the Americans. So that means the Americans scored a 2 for initiative, and the Germans scored a 6. So the Germans win initiative, which means they decide who goes first in the upcoming command phase, and they also gain access to the exploit phase of the turn. Now, this also determines how much impetus both sides have. You add to your totals for initiative +1 for every company you have. In this case, I'm only counting companies on the battlefield, not off-board as reserves. So both sides have one company on the battlefield, so that's +1 each. So they'll get a 7. Germans will get a 7, and the Americans will get a 3. And that's how much impetus points both sides will have to spend during the turn. And I'm using little rubies to show the German ones. Those are 7 there. And the Americans have 3, which I'm showing over there. So looks like the Germans got a big boost there. So the Germans will be bringing on some troops, I am sure, to try and take that village and reinforce the Fallschirmjäger. And the Americans only have 3 impetus to respond with. So next up is to decide if the Germans are going to go first or if they're going to force the Americans to go first. Probably the Germans will go first, I think. Should be fun. Should be interesting. I'll go up to the next few turns and show you the results of it. Americans are going to have to get their recon elements up there and try and discover some of these units that are hidden before they can really do any offensive action against them. Okay, folks, we'll see you later on during the game. I'll let you know how it goes. Folks, finished turn one. The Germans had initiative, and they went first, as expected. One of the first things they did is they brought in some of their Panzer, which are over here on this side. There was about a platoon's worth of troops coming on, along with a half-track. And I also brought in the battle group's headquarters. Now, I don't think that's allowed in the rules to bring them on at the same time as a combat group, but I did anyway. So that's perfectly fine. Also, they had a Panzer IV with them, but he got blasted off the table during the Americans' turn. There is a Sherman up here in the village that put down some pretty heavy fire and forced him to disengage. He failed both his tests, and off the table he went, right up in there. So that's unfortunate for the Germans. The Germans also put down some MG-42 fire and mortar fire down here in this area, and they managed to suppress a couple of recon units, one of which was this Jeep, which you can see back here on this path. He's fallen back, and there's some troops in there in that Jeep. The other Jeep, like a bat out of hell, all the way down here, did take some incoming defensive fire from the German MG-42. And by the way, that machine gun was located right here, if you remember. It no longer is. I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, there was some defensive fire coming from this hilltop from that MG-42. So it did manage to do some nasty work to the Americans there. However, the Americans returned fire on this hill and managed to force that Fallschirmjäger machine gun down to the road here, suppressed. And if it did rally. They are veterans, so it did manage to rally that suppression off. And yeah, that fire came from up here. There's a couple 60mm mortars up here. Their 81mm mortar is back here with their HQ, but did not put any fire down because there's no targets. Their company headquarters is about the only observer they can use to do that and direct that fire. And he's nowhere to see anybody. No targets. Remember, all these Fallschirmjäger are hidden at the moment. The only ones revealed are the company HQ, this mortar, and that machine gun. That's about it. That's the situation, folks. One other thing is the Americans did bring in some of their troops right back there, if you could see them. They got a Sherman and a couple M3s. And remember, each vehicle is 2 to 3 actual vehicles. So, and each of these M3 half-tracks has actually got a full platoon in it. About 4 stands worth of troops, including command, each. So that's a lot of stuff that came in on that edge there. We'll see what they do with that. So that's about it, folks. That's turn 1. A lot happened. These Americans down in the woods here, they didn't really do anything. They failed their activation, so they're stuck there in the woods. So far, the Americans have not yet moved their troops up to try and reveal some of these hidden units. So we'll see what happens, folks, in the next turn. Looking good. Stay turn 2. Let's see what's going on. Well, roll for initiative. The Americans got a 3. The Germans got a 2. And both sides are going to add +1 because there are national characteristic or whatever you want, time period, army, whatever. They both add +1. So that'll make this a 4, and the Germans will be a nice 3. So it looks like the Americans are going to win initiative. Now, they'll be able to determine who goes first in the upcoming command phase. On top of this, the Americans and the Germans will both add +2 to these to figure out their impetus for the turn. And they're adding 1 for every company command they have on the table. And they both have 2 company commanders on the table. So they add 2. And this determines how much impetus they have for the turn. So the Germans will have 5 and the Americans will have 6 impetus. And when I come over here, you'll see I have 5 rubies for the Germans because that's their impetus. That's what I use to keep track of it. And the Americans will have 6. So here's the situation. Now the Americans get to determine who goes first in the command phase. They can go first themselves, or they can force the Germans to go first. So it's quite an advantage gaining initiative. But in this case, the Americans are going to force the Germans to go first. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is it kind of deprives the Germans of targets to shoot at during their command phase. Because if they go first, their command phase will be first, and there's the only targets available to them are what's on the table now. Like down there by that little bridge, there is a little recon jeep right in front of it, right in there. And that's probably about the only target available for shooting at down here. Everything else is kind of hidden away and got lots of cover, as you can see. They might get some more shots against these guys down here. We'll see with their mortars. But yeah, that's the point of that. It'll force them to go first. The Germans, of course, will probably bring on more reinforcements down here to supplement this little force. We'll see. But that's what's going on there. Another thing to keep in mind is that the Americans will gain access to that exploit phase, which gives them a chance to move additional units or combat groups during the turn. The Germans won't be able to do that because they didn't win initiative. So it doesn't matter who goes first. It's who gets initiative gains access to that exploit phase. And basically how many combat groups, or platoons basically, groups of 6 or fewer bases or vehicles, is what it comes to. How many of them that you can use or give exploit orders to is based on the number of HQ units on the table. That includes the battle group HQ as well. So for the Americans, they have their battle group HQ, which is up there. It's on the table. That's 1. Plus they have 2 company commanders, if you remember. So it's a total of 3. They'll be able to automatically activate 3 combat groups and take extra movement with them, really. And there's no defensive fire against them either. So it's quite potent, that exploit phase. I do like it. So, okay, let's get into this. Let's get into turn 2 and see what happens. That finished turn 2. As expected, the Americans forced the Germans to go first. And, of course, the Germans had no targets to open up on. Unless they come out of their hidden status. As you can remember, all these Fallschirmjäger are hidden down there. So they would have to come out of that if they wanted to open fire and have some targets. There wasn't any. So the German shooting was very ineffective. I think they let go with some mortar fire. Totally ineffective. I think they tried to put down a little bombardment here in the village, which was kind of stupid. Fallschirmjäger mortar should have been shooting down here, but really not many targets. The Germans did bring on some Panzer Grenadiers, another basically a platoon worth inside that half-track right there. It's about as far as they got. And of course, there's the company commander right there, along with the battle group commander on the left. And that's about it. And all these Germans, by the way, the Heer troops are regulars. They do have 1 off-board platoon that is veteran. So hopefully that'll help them in the assault on the village. We shall see, folks. We shall see. Let's see. The Americans went next, and their fire was just as ineffective, unfortunately. They did manage to get this platoon forward into the trees. Still, all those hidden Fallschirmjäger are laying quiet, so they don't know what's going on. They moved up a recon jeep that far. Still cannot see over that little slope, unfortunately. This unit right there is suppressed. Just a unit of regular troops. Still got that Sherman sitting in the reserve here. Doesn't want to risk moving up too far and exposing itself to possible Panzerfaust fire, so he's kind of holding back. They did bring on some reserves. These reserves, they came in the last turn. They did move up and debust all their infantry, so there's a lot of infantry up there. About 2 platoons worth of infantry, along with one of the company commanders as well, located right there. The 2nd company commander's right there. So they moved up on this slope and debust. They're ready to go into the woods there if they so choose, or move into the village and defend it. This Sherman back here didn't get off the mark and do anything. During the exploitation phase, which was quite useful for the Americans, they did manage to bring on some extra troops, including a couple. Where are they? I think they're down here, actually. Right in here. They came in over here. I think there's like 2 squads and a platoon command. They deployed up on this area across the stream, and they're up here in this woods at this moment. So there is a handful of troops, Americans, kind of outflanking the positions of the Fallschirmjäger. See if that does anything effective. And the other thing that they did is they brought in a 76 Sherman right there. That's a 76 Sherman. Come on during the exploitation phase. And that's about it. There wasn't much going on, so it's only turn 2, so it's early. Okay, folks. Turn 3 is coming up. Let's see what can be done next. I should add, during the exploit phase for the Americans, they also brought in these 2 squads that have a bazooka attached. Coming off this company commander, you can do that. I think it's really cool. Instead of your reinforcements, your reserve, coming on from a board edge, you do, during the exploit phase, have the option of bringing on non-vehicles, basically infantry and cavalry units, off of the position of your company commanders, wherever they are. In this case, I got him kind of up forward in a central position there, and I put 2 squads deploying off of him during the exploit phase. It's kind of like troops sneaking forward. So if you can imagine, maybe these troops were heading up this road, for instance, all the while this battle was raging, and when the time was right, there they are. They made themselves known at that wall. I like that. That's pretty cool. So they don't have to come on from an edge. They can come on a position from your company HQ. As long as he's not close to the enemy, they can do that. So there you go. That's pretty, folks. Then I go through a little example of shooting, a simple one. Here's our situation so far. You can see the Fallschirmjäger medium machine gun holding their position here in the front of the bridge behind this barricade. They got cover on the flanks as well. There's some shrubs and whatnot. They do have hard cover for being on the bridge as well, as this barricade counts as hard cover. So they're pretty much dug in there. It's pretty good. Anyway, I got a little smoke tuft in front of them to show that they defensive fired earlier during this turn, primarily against this Jeep, attempting to spot them coming down the road. Well, the Jeep survived. As a result of that, this tank also moved up and took some shots at the Fallschirmjägers over here on the bridge. Ineffective. You can see all the damage going on. So far, the medium machine guns are doing all right. However, Americans are not done. Over here, they have 2 squads, an LMG squad and a rifle squad with a bazooka back here, by the way, lined up in ineffective range of this medium machine gun. Now, they can open up, and what has to be done now is the Americans have to activate these 2 units as a combat group, which he's going to do. So he basically declares these 2 units will activate as a combat group, and he needs a 7+ on 2d6 to activate them. And it's always a 7+. And of course, he got himself a nice juicy 9, which means they can activate. Do whatever he wants with them now. So one of the orders available to him is fire. That's basically to just hold position and open up on a target that they can see and that is within range. And that is that medium machine gun. There's no other targets around, really. The closest opponent is this medium machine gun. Double check the range here for the light machine gun. We can see it's at about 10, and for the rifle it's a little less than 10. So it's definitely effective range for both teams or squads opening up on them. And what that means, there'll be no modifier for range. I can tell you right off the bat also, there will be a -2 to hit for both of those units because this unit does have cover. That line of sight passes through this wall down here. So they're going to have cover, hard cover. And that's going to amount to a -2. Now I'll show you some of the modifiers here, just to give you some idea. Here's a listing on the play sheet of all the various weapons and ranges they have and where effective. Like for instance, here's the rifle section. 0 to 4 is close, and then we've got 4 to 12 is effective, and they have no long range. And there, so that's that. LMG is right underneath it. That's down here. A similar situation. Up to 4 is close. 4 to 14 is effective range. So yeah, so that's how you know what category they're at. And effective range has no penalty when you shoot. Close range would give you a +2. Down below that, we have a list of modifiers, which are used by vehicles and anything that's shooting. They go through these 9 modifiers. And the last one is for defensive fire, so that one will be ignored. But there's a look at them. For example, if the firing unit is elite or militia, they're going to get a +1 if they're elite or a -1 if they're militia. Where are we there? There we are, so you can see that. And so on and so forth. Now in this case, here's the one for target in cover, hard cover. And we'll see that that is a -2 right there. So yeah, we know what the modifiers are. It's going to be a total of -2. Now, to hit anything, you're going to need at least a 6. And it's the same for all units in the game. So 6 or more, and they need to roll 2d6. And they have a -2. So let's see if they can do that. Now, they're shooting as a group. So they're going to roll 1 once for both units. And they got a 7. They need at least a 6. Now, the hard cover would take this down to 5, which would be no effect. So they wouldn't actually hit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip that to something more useful here. You guys didn't see that. I didn't do that. But anyway, yeah. The roll was a 10. Now, we -2 from that. And that'll be an 8. So with an 8 and needing at least a 6, they are going to hit. Now, the results you get is important because this will be used to determine the results. The higher you roll, the better, the more effective it is. So one other thing to look at here will be the number of stands. Each stand represents when you're trying to figure out how much damage something does. And what I mean is that, well, you'd think that one rifle squad counts as one rifle squad. And it does. One stand equals one stand for resolving the effect. Light machine guns, to reflect their more devastating firepower, increased firepower rate, count as 2 stands when you're resolving the effect of a hit. So, in other words, these 2 units firing together will add what they represent. In this case, 2 for the LMG, 1 for the rifle. Total them, it's 3. So they'll count as 3 stands when you're resolving the effect of the hits. They hit, so they're going to count as 3 stands instead of 2. That's how that works. So our result was 8. We go to our effects chart, which is somewhere here. There it is. Let me get the right chart out. You can see what I'm talking about here. What you do is you look up the number of stands that's being represented here in terms of results, which is 3 stands, the 3 sections it's called, squads, however you want to say it. And you reference it with the die that was rolled to hit. In this case, it was 8. So if we look at that result, we get a disengage times 1 plus a suppression times 1. Now these are names of tests to figure out what happens to the target. So there's a disengage test and there's a suppression test that have to be distributed to the targets. Now when you shoot, you can the first target you choose, it's called the main target. That's the first one that takes the effect. So that first main target would take the disengage test. Any further targets, and it's any target unit within 4 inches of the main one, can also be hit. They would be distributed, whatever results follow this. And in this case, everything is on the medium machine gun. There is no other squads in 4 inches of him. So he would have to make both tests in this case, a disengage and a suppression test. It's pretty deadly. So let's take the tests and see what happens to these Germans. The first thing we want the German machine gun to do is to take their disengage test. And again, if we look at the charts here, we'll look that up. Disengage test is right here. They're going to roll their dice for the test, apply any modifiers. There's not many. They're all at the top here. Like if they're elite, they get a +1. If they're militia, they get a -1. And then just reference the result. So we're going to do a disengage test first. And cross-reference it with the result. There's no modifiers here. The Fallschirmjäger are veterans, but there's no modifier for that. So let's see what happens. Higher the better. They get a 6. So let's look and see what a 6 gives us on this little morale test. 6 is located right here, 5 to 7, and we reference that with the type of test. Disengage test. The result is disengage. All right, so the effects of this have to be applied immediately. So let's go back to our situation here on the bridge. This unit, to disengage, has to fall back away from the enemy. It can't move closer, but it has to fall back 6 inches away from the enemy. Now, it doesn't have to if it's already in cover, but it has to fall back at least 1 inch. So we're going to do that. We're going to pull him back off the bridge. Well, he's going to stay on the bridge. I'm going to pull him back from the barricades at least an inch because I do have cover. So we're going to put him right there. And he would be considered suppressed. I'll give him a little marker here, if I can find one, show that he is now suppressed. Now, he still has to take another test. He has to make a suppression test now, if you remember. So let's go to the dice tray here and make that roll. And it's done the same way. Higher the better. Ooh, nice 10. And let's go see what the results of that morale test are. Again, same thing. There's no modifiers. 10 plus under suppression test, that's the first row here, is obey orders. Okay, so they're cool. That fire there didn't really hurt them that much. So there you go. They disengaged, in this case because they're in cover. They just fell back a little bit. If there was no cover, they could fall back just far enough to get in that cover within 6 inches. If there's no cover at all, they have to fall back the full 6 inches. That's how that works. So there you go, folks. That's an example. And these two units up here would now have been activated, and they're done for the turn. So that's that. Okay, folks, finished turn 3. Americans won initiative. Again, I think that's all 3 turns so far. But this time, they decided to go first, as opposed to letting the Germans go first. And, of course, the Americans would have the exploit phase once again. All the troops you see on the table for the Americans are all the troops they have. So they have nothing in reserve at this point, except for, I think, 4 half-tracks. They got some M3s there. No crew, so they're just transport, and that's about it. So we'll see if they keep them off the table. Let's see, up in this area right here, you can see there is Americans that they made their push here, unloaded from their half-tracks. 1 half-track bogged, and it's pretty much disabled, so it's out of the battle. There is another half-track here with its MG crewed by some troops that are in the half-track. There's a Sherman sitting up top on that ridgeline. But yeah, the Americans pushed into this area of the woods and are currently in this high field area. And they're also, by the way, down here on the corner, they have a couple squads of troops. I don't know if you can see them, but they are down there. There's a couple squads in there with a platoon commander. We'll see what they do. Pretty much they basically move forward. I know the Germans did reply with what they could. They did run out of impetus pretty early, and their turn ended kind of sooner than they expected. They did manage to put a bombardment down, some off-board artillery, battalion support artillery, came down in this area, and they did manage to suppress a few units. Did nothing to the Sherman, but they did suppress some units, and most of them are now rallied. I think there's 2 units suppressed currently, including that half-track, which is right there. That's about it. And they've also pushed ahead with their infantry here as well. So they got a lot of infantry along this line. Putting down fire on the bridge, of course. This Fallschirmjäger medium machine gun is holding its own. These Fallschirmjäger in the woods down here were revealed, and there was a 81mm mortar bombardment called in. 1 unit of Fallschirmjäger bit the dust. They took off. They couldn't take it. They were in the middle there somewhere, but they left. The rest still remain. The Americans have also pushed out of the woods from this area. They are now up in here. They got their infantry moving forward, kind of exposed, but I'm sure they're hunkering down. See what happens in the next turn. Got a Jeep right here, a recon. Took some incoming defensive fire from the MG up here. It survived. Currently, there's more American infantry in front of that Jeep. I don't know if you could see that, but they are there. Kind of exposed, but they're there. Got some support from another Sherman, putting down some fire on the bridge. Relatively ineffective. Of course, there's a company commander HQ right there who's been calling down some mortar support. Somewhat effective. As for the Germans, like I said, they didn't really get a chance to do a hell of a lot. Their impetus ran out fairly early. They did manage to bring on 2 more sections of Panzer IVs this time, and they're kind of up on this sloped area. One thing interesting here is that the Americans, if you look over there, you'll see right on the flank of the village, there are 2 Shermans, a 76 and a 75. They did come out as far as this area here, took some fire, put down some fire on these infantry, suppressing them, pushing them back a little bit, and also did some defensive fire on these troops over here entering the board. Relatively ineffective. This unit here is suppressed. As soon as these Panzer IVs come on, they hightailed it back into the village. So they're now back where they started. They're hiding behind some bushes, basically, so they do have cover. That's about it for this side. The Germans did move up their battalion battle group headquarters up into this field. They have a half-track on this road, ready to put down some MG fire. Could not see this unit up here, which is suppressed, by the way. So that's the situation, folks. That's what it looks like. It is turn 3. There's a long way to go yet. So far, I don't know. The Americans are putting a lot of stuff on the board. I mean, that is a lot of infantry coming along in this area. It looks like they're really pushing for that bridge and almost completely ignoring defending this village. They got the 2 Shermans and 2 squads of infantry. That's really about it. And they got no more troops to bring on from reserve at this point. The Germans do. They got about 2 platoons of Panzer Grenadiers and half-tracks yet to bring on. We'll see if they do. Okay, folks, going into turn 4. Let's see what happens. So far, it is a draw. Here we are, top of turn 4. Got to roll initiative. It's kind of critical, especially over here where the tanks are about to be engaged. We got the 2 Panzer IVs coming in off the top of this hill from reserve. And down here facing them is 2 Shermans, one of which is a 76. So, yeah, they're kind of facing off. So whoever gets initiative or goes first will be able to engage the other first. So it could be kind of critical, depending on how accurate these tanks are, or basically how they react. So initiative may play a big role here. So let's get to that initiative roll and see what happens. Now both sides will add +1 to their D6. High roll has an it. For the turn. Ooh, the Germans get initiative. They're going to add +1 to that, so that's 5. +1 for the Americans, so that's 3. So that's the initiative. The Germans have the initiative. They will gain access to the exploit phase as well, which not only gives them a chance to do some extra moving, but bring on some reinforcements as well. For impetus totals, we had 2 because both sides have 2 company headquarters on the table and in action. So they will have, the Germans, 7 impetus, and the Americans will add 2, and they will have 5 impetus. So I'll pull out the rubies for that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the Germans. Put them right there. I use them to keep track. And 6 for the Americans. I'll put them on the other side. So now I'm going to step back and take a look at this and see what I'm going to do with these sides. First, I've got to decide if the Germans are going to attack first. I'm pretty sure they will. Germans have initiative. They're going to go first, definitely. And they're definitely going to activate these tanks up here, try and take out the enemy Shermans. Probably pretty important because that's the whole reason I put them there, to try and take out the enemy armor. So the first thing they have to do is activate, and they need a 7+ to do that. Let me see if I can get this down here. All right, there you go, 7+. Use the right dice here. They get a 6 and a 10, so no problem. So they activate, no problem. I'm going to give them a fire order. Let's check the range and the cover that's involved here. Now, the first thing you do when you shoot with a group of things, you have to determine and show what target each one is firing at before you roll your dice for the effects. So this platoon commander is Panzer IV. He's shooting at the 76 Sherman behind the shrubs. He's at 19 inches. Now this second Panzer IV, he's about 19 inches as well. He's shooting at the 75 Sherman, the one to the right. So there, I've allocated my targets. I will now shoot, and we'll start with this guy here. Its effective range, no modifier. The only modifier is going to be for cover, which the 76 Sherman has. So now, let's roll this. I roll my 2d6, and I'm going to have a -1 to this roll because of the cover. I hit on a 6 plus 7. -1 is 6, so I just barely got a hit, unfortunately. Okay, now what we do is we add to this, because it's anti-tank fire we're talking about here. We got to add the armor penetration of my Panzer IV. It's an L75, so it's an addition of 6. AP is 6. So I'll add 6 to this result. Let's put this here like that. And I subtract the armor of the target, which in this case is a 76 Sherman M4 from the front. There's an armor rating of 4. So that knocks this 6 down to 2. So the grand total, and this result will be taken to the effects chart, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you look at our little chart here, if you could see that, I'm getting a lot of glare. We look up 8 under the AF anti-tank row here, and it's disengage test. So the target, the 76 Sherman, has to make a disengage morale test, which is down here. We find the disengage. So there's the possible results, anything from obey orders to suppress, disengage, or disperse. For AFEs, it would be damaged and disengaged. That's the worst result that could happen. And that would be on a 4 or less. So let's roll that. He makes his 2d6 roll. And he gets a 4. Now, there's no modifiers here. These are regulars. It's not a shot from the flank or the rear. So there's no modifiers to this roll. So it's a straight up result of 4, which is, under the disengage test, this one right here. It's AFE damaged and disengage. Yeah, so they're damaged. They're going to be marked with 1 damage, which won't destroy the tank. It's just going to be penalized when it shoots and has to make a disengage. So let me carry that out. Alright, so I'll mark him with this little marker to show he's damaged from this point on, and he has to make a disengage move. He has to move back at least 1 inch, even if he's in cover. He is in cover. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull him back away around the shrub. I don't want to move through that shrub that's in the back, but I'll move him the minimum. So he's going to move 1 inch away from his current position. Now, the only thing you really are required here with these, he's also suppressed. I got to mark that as well. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing these moves is that when you make a fallback move, you cannot move closer to an enemy. And you have to move away from the guy that's shooting at you, which he just did. So there's no problems there. So that was the result of that firing. And next, we'll go to our second Panzer IV, and he's targeting the other Sherman, which is a 75. And we already know it's pretty much the same kind of shot. There's just going to be a modifier of -1 to the chance of hitting. So let's see what happens if this other tank can score a hit. Again, he needs a 6+ to hit. He's going to have a -1 for the cover. He gets a 6, 7, 8. -1 for the cover is going to be a 7. Okay, so that's definitely a hit. Let's add to that our armor penetration of 6 and minus the front armor of the Sherman 75, which is 4. So this will be a total of 2. So our total here, to look up on the effects chart, is 6, 7, 8, 9. And let's see what that is. Now again, we're looking under the top section here for anti-tank fire. We look up 9, we find out it's a disengage test. So the 76 Sherman has to make a disengage test, which is basically just what the 76 had to do. So let's make their test. Again, no modifiers, it's a straight up roll, 2d6, and that's going to be a result of 6. Let's look up that under the disengage test. Look up 6, it is disengage. So basically it's the same result that the 76 Sherman suffered, minus the damage. So a little less damage. And he'll disengage as well in the same way. I'll probably back him up the inch and leave him there. Yeah, that should be good. There it is. Back up a little bit here, back with the tanks. Now, what if we look at this again? The 76 Sherman was in cover. He had to disengage. What that means is it has to move 6 inches away from the enemy that shot at it. But if it's in cover, it doesn't have to. In this case, it would have to go at least an inch, and if it's still remaining in cover. Well, in this case, he wouldn't be remaining in cover because the shooters have high ground. They can see over this hedge unless he's up against it, which he was. So he can't stop there. What would actually happen is he would go as far back as he could and stop within cover. So he actually went this far with his disengage move. And he's damaged and he's also suppressed. Just to clarify that. And I know I stopped him from here before, but that's not the case. this tank as well. This Sherman had the same result. If you remember, it was a disengage, and the same situation would have happened. He would have continued further than 1 inch, the minimum, and continue back as far as this position, which gave him cover. That's when they can stop. If there's no cover available, or he doesn't start in cover, he has to go the full 6 inches back away from the enemy. That's how the rule works. And this is what happened here in this case. And of course, the 75 is also suppressed, just to clarify. Okay, with all the fire there, with the tanks done, it's time to look elsewhere on the battlefield to see where else the Germans can take advantage of the situation. And I think this looks pretty good. We got some American infantry moving in the open. Basically 3 squads there. Platoon commander and everything. They're making a move for the bridge. We also got infantry on the road up here with a Jeep recon. And what do I have? Well, I got a medium machine gun section. 4 inches behind him, there is a rifle section, which is currently hidden, by the way. Next to him, we have a suppressed platoon command base. They basically can't shoot in the game. They have other functions, platoon commanders. And over here, we have an assault rifle armed Fallschirmjäger unit, which is not hidden. And they're in the woods. So I think what I want to do is try and activate as many units now as I can. In other words, with 1 die roll. Now, what I do is I pick a base, and anyone within 4 inches of them can activate as a command group, up to 6. 5 if there's no platoon commander involved. Normally what you do is you choose a platoon commander, and every friendly base within 4 inches of him can activate. That's how you can activate as many as 6 stands, including the platoon commander. But in this case, it's not going to be the case because the platoon commander is suppressed, so he can't be activated for anything other than rallying or withdrawing. So I want to activate him, medium machine gun. So I'll nominate him as the command section for this activation, for this command group. You can do that in this game. If there's no platoon commander involved, he would be deemed the command section temporarily. Now, the only one within 4 inches of him would be this unit of Fallschirmjäger rifles, which are hidden. But I think I might reveal them. And if I do so, I can activate both these with 1 roll. And I'd probably want to just do a shoot order. Medium machine gun firing at these guys up here on the road. And the rifles can't shoot through their friends, so he could shoot up here at these guys in the open, right here. Now, one of the cool things is the way firepower is represented in this game. I talked about this earlier, is that each stand represents so many additional stands, the more firepower it's representing. So in the case of the medium machine gun, this actually counts as 4 stands when it fires. Very potent. Rifle squads count as just a single stand. And if you take a look at the results table for 1 stand firing, they basically can only affect 1 stand when they shoot. So it would be more useful for him to just target a single enemy. And before I confuse you, what that means is this, is that when you shoot, okay, let's say this medium machine gun is going to shoot. It targets 1 enemy squad that it can see, and that's termed the main target. Now, optionally, I can choose up any additional stands within 4 inches of the main target to be secondary targets. In other words, they can also be hit, which means they'll have to take possibly morale checks as well. The first morale check made, whatever type it is made by the main target. Additional ones are dispersed amongst the other targets, the owning player's discretion. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate these 2 sections, the rifle section back here and the medium machine gun. They're going to open up. They're going to activate together as 1 group, and they're going to issue a fire order if successful. The medium machine gun will target this unit on the road as the main target, and as a secondary target it will also count this light machine gun section. It's not close range. Their close range is 4 inches. This is a little bit beyond 4 inches. So it'll be effective range. There'll be no penalty to hit for that. There will be a -1 to hit, however, because we're looking at shooting at infantry which are stationary in the open, right here. And these guys here have cover, which is the same penalty, -1 in both cases, so there'll be a -1 in total in this case. When the rifles shoot, if they also activate with the medium machine gun, they can only really affect one target, if you look at the results, the effects results. So I'll only pick one target, and that'll be this lead unit here. And their maximum range for rifles is 12 inches, close range is 4, so they are definitely at effective range, no penalty. However, these are stationary infantry in the open, so the Germans will suffer a -1 to hit as well. So, and in all cases, you need a 6 or greater to score a hit. So that's how that's going to work. Let's start off by making that activation roll and see if I can activate these 2 units of Fallschirmjäger. That would probably be a good idea. Otherwise, it's all for nothing. And again, it's just these 2 units. I get a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so no problem activating that. Alright, let's activate them and I'll show you the result. Shoot now done. It was completely ineffective. The medium machine gun opened up on these 2 squads, like I said, but they completely missed the shot. This squad of Fallschirmjäger with rifles, rifle squad, also missed their target, which was this squad here. I went on to activate the platoon commander in the woods separately. He did a rally order. He activated and rallied, so they took away his suppression, so he's good for the next turn. This squad, all by itself, activated separately, and it decided to use a fire order as well on this squad of infantry advancing up in the open here. Unfortunately, it also failed its shots, so it was a dismal shooting accuracy going on there. Anyway, the next spot to look at would be this medium machine gun up here in the woods. Now that used to be the one that was sitting up on the crest line there, doing some pretty accurate machine gun fire on the Americans. Unfortunately, it took some fire and was forced to fall back with a disengaged result after being shot at. It was suppressed and it eventually rallied. Now I got to get him back in action. So his orders are basically to hold that position on the crest line and issue some fire. And with the Americans pouring across here, I think he better get back up there. That's what I think. So, next thing I want to do is activate him. Just him. There's nobody within 4 inches of any way to form a combat group. So it's basically a combat group of 1. Roll 2d6, 7 or greater, I activate him. So it's that simple. Let's see if I can do that. And if I am successful, I will probably issue a tactical fire and maneuver order. It basically allows me to move and fire or fire and move. However, when you do fire, you suffer a -1 if you're regulars. These guys are veterans, so they don't have to suffer that penalty of -1. So they can move to the crest line and shoot without a penalty for moving and firing. Let's see, I got a 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a good activation roll. So they're going to do that. Now, the only thing I have to be cautious of is enemy defensive fire. And considering the range and the distance to the enemy, so the only thing I have to worry about would be that Sherman right there. I would be in effective range if I move straight up from my current position to the crest line, so I have to pay attention to that. It's very likely that Sherman will issue some defensive fire since there's really no other targets close by, and it's always good to use your defensive fire whenever you have it. Basically, your defensive fire and shooting during your command phase basically gives you 2 opportunities to shoot in the battle. So if you can defensive fire, take it. It's just a matter of when and at what target. So I'll be back, folks, and I'll show you the results of this little maneuver I got going here. All right, so that's that. He survived. He got up to the position here. He did take some defensive fire from the Sherman tank. As you can see here, there's a few explosions going on, but he did make his way right up to the hill. And he got himself in position, deployed his guns, and opened up. Now, normally when you use a fire and maneuver order, you suffer the -1 penalty if you're regulars or worse. And these guys, Fallschirmjäger, are veterans. They don't suffer that penalty. That's good. So taking advantage of that, they opened fire. Priority target was this unit up here of infantry right in front of the bridge. And these units up here as well, I decided to include as secondary targets. They're within 4 inches basically of the main target. These guys both have cover, so it's a -1 to hit. And this stand is stationary in the open, which would be a -1 to hit as well. Taken together, it's a total of -1 to hit. They made their roll, suffered the -1, they hit. Unfortunately, the results were not enough to cause any damage to these units. The result on the morale test was obey orders, so I was totally ineffective against these guys. Perhaps it was just a little clumsiness on the part of the Fallschirmjäger getting their guns in position, to be expected, really. So that was the result. I'm surprised he survived the defensive fire, but that's good with me. So, okay, folks, let's see what's next. For the Germans. I've finished turn 4. All is done. Up here on the hill, of course, if you remember the machine gun on the bridge and the one up on the hill, they withstood the enemy fire, that's for sure. Their return fire was not very effective, except for the Fallschirmjäger up here on the hill. They did rally themselves back on the hill, and they put down some really devastating machine gun fire down in this area. As you can see all the smoke clouds going on. They basically wiped out 3 squads of infantry cutting across the stream. Quite devastating. Actually, the whole turn wasn't that good for the Americans. They lost the initiative, and they also failed to activate several combat groups, so it wasn't good. In addition, over here in the woods, you can see there's a lot more Panzer Grenadiers deployed, and that's because of the exploit phase. The Germans were able to bring on, I think it was like 4 squads or so, 3 of which are veterans, Panzer Grenadiers. They deployed them up here off of the company headquarters unit, and they're able to do that in the exploit phase. It's really powerful, especially if you win the exploit phase. It's a good tactic to utilize. On this side of the battlefield, the Panzers IVs have moved up slightly. They pushed back. The Sherman tanks, you can just barely see one over there. There's a 76 Sherman there that is currently damaged from fire. The 75 Sherman, which was on its left, you can't really see it, that is suppressed currently. So that's the situation, folks. There's no other suppressed units on the tabletop at this point. They've all managed to rally. The Germans have lost 2 units so far for breakpoint, and the Americans have lost 4. 3 squads lost during this turn. Quite devastating. One thing I am doing with this game is I am treating the Fallschirmjäger and the Heer reinforcements on this side as 2 separate armies. So they have 2 separate breakpoints. The Americans, on the other hand, I'm treating them as 1 battle group, 1 army basically, and there's only 1 breakpoint for them. So we'll see what effect that has on the game. Down here, the Americans they're pushing hard on the bridge, but they're not getting anywhere. The Germans are holding their ground. This group of troops here is basically stalled. They failed to move at all this turn, just did not activate. So that's the gist of turn 4, folks. I think we'll jump into turn 5 next, and stay tuned. It's getting bloody. Hey folks, we're pretty much involved in this battle report. I'm going to give you a little interlude, a little update on the strategies being used by the armies so far. And as always, it's a community battle report, so if you want to contribute some ideas or strategies, leave them in the comments. As long as this game is still going on my tabletop, you're welcome to join in. Give me some advice and see if we can give one side the advantage. Now, let's look at the Americans. Their objective right from the get-go with their battle group, and it's an armored infantry battle group, basically, so there's lots of infantry, has been to get their troops on the table as quickly as possible, leave a small force defending the village, which they've done, and take this bridge as early as possible. It's proving to be a difficult task at the moment because these Fallschirmjäger are veterans and they're not exactly an easy nut to crack. At least that's what it's showing so far. The Americans have taken a beating in this area up here, and you can see the line here of yellow chips, which shows the separation of the forces, basically, at least the front line forces. We've got plenty of American infantry here in these areas down here. These guys got to move forward pretty soon. They're in a position to strike that bridge, so they're achieving their objective so far, although it has stalled as far as taking that bridge. The attack is supported by Shermans. There is 4 of them, I believe, an entire platoon plus of these babies. We got a 75 up there on the slope, 1 over here, kind of in reserve, and we got 2 more on the opposite side of the village. Over there, there's 2 of them, one of which is suppressed, a 75, and there's a 76 Sherman, which is damaged over there, holding the flank of the village. There's about 4 squads defending the village at the moment. The center is considerably weak, actually. If we look at the Germans advancing into the woods here, almost unopposed, they're in a position to strike the village as well as the center of the American line. And there's about a company's worth of troops here, all along these lines here. Some of them are veterans, and are protecting their flank with the Panzer IVs, of course. So they're definitely focused on getting that village, and I'm anticipating an assault on the village very soon. Unfortunately for the Americans, they're following their plan. They're going after the bridge, leaving a small force to defend the village. Unfortunately, pretty much all of their reserves are committed. They don't really have a hell of a lot to support this village at the moment, mainly because the attack here on the bridge is kind of slowed down. So that's the situation so far. They're kind of weak in the center, and I don't know if the Germans are going to recognize that and try and split the Americans in this area up here. We'll see. Basically surrounding the village, really, preventing any future reinforcement of it. We'll see what happens. Now, the Americans still can call in some artillery. They've yet to do so. They have 1 mission off board that they can bring in. And, of course, they have a single section of 81mm mortars also that can be used effectively, which have been used effectively, actually, against this MG position on the hill. And like I said, unfortunately, these Fallschirmjäger are tough to crack. So we'll see what happens with that. Down there, more toward the north, up here, we do have some recon elements for the Americans. They have a Jeep with a 50 cal, as well as some recon infantry, and some regular infantry up here that have basically bypassed the German defenders up here. They got a squad up in the woods, and they got a squad here. And that's about it. And they're basically bypassing them, coming deep into the zone here. They've basically crossed the stream here. This is the only spot where the Americans have done so. They are in a position, and there's Americans in that ruins, by the way. 2 squads, I believe. Well, a squad and a platoon command. They are in a position to strike the rear zone of the Fallschirmjäger. They've got some mortars here, and of course they have their heavy or their medium machine gun up on that hill. Mainly, they're a distraction more than anything for the Fallschirmjäger. Not much going on there, really. Maybe just surround and take out some of those units that are surrounded with the Fallschirmjäger. That's about it. Be a distraction. But anyway, that's the plan. That's the situation. And it's going to be kind of critical here in the middle for the Americans. If the Germans decide to pierce through here, it's going to be tough reinforcing that village once it is assaulted. And I think that will be a possibility, as we do have troops moving up on the village already. We'll see what happens with that. It's pretty obvious what the Germans are doing. They're basically got their here Panzer Grenadiers coming onto the board quite efficiently. They are in a position to assault the village at this point. They do have something going on down here. There's their battle group headquarters. They do have some half-tracks heading up the road, or about to, across that ford. And they have one up here as well, right there, putting down some MG fire on that unit of infantry. Yeah, so I don't know what they're doing on their right flank, on the eastern portion of the battlefield. They are in a position to take up these ruins, as well as take these woods. Let me back out of here so you can get an idea what I'm talking about. These woods right here. They are in a position to take that. Maybe relieve some of the pressure being put on the bridge. I'm not sure. Again, they're just half-tracks with squads in them. They're nothing major to be concerned with. But we'll see what they do. In the defense for the Fallschirmjäger, pretty simple. They're just holding back in their positions. They've only lost one squad of troops so far. So they're holding their own. Basically dispersed all along here. They're occupying this building. They have a unit here and a unit over here. They're basically dispersed quite well. But they're not doing much, unfortunately. That's the situation for the Germans. I think they're going to hold back, and they're going to focus their efforts on the village. And once they can surround it and take it, they'll probably make a move on the bridge area and take some pressure off of the attack there of the Fallschirmjäger. So I think that's what the Germans are doing, and I think that's the situation for the Americans. We shall see in the upcoming turns. One of the things to take into account is both armies, both sides have breakpoints, which will end the battle early if they are reached. Let me see here. Now, the Fallschirmjäger and the Panzer Grenadiers are two separate armies in this battle. The Fallschirmjäger can afford to take, once they reach 7 losses, they're going to lose the battle. They're going to pull out of the area, and that's it. So far, they've lost 1. For the Panzer Grenadiers, they are at 11. If they lose 11, they're taken out of action. And for the Americans, it's 17. No, that's wrong. For the Americans, it's 19. Sorry. So they could lose 19, and they've lost 4 so far. The Panzer Grenadiers have lost, I believe, 1. They lost a tank, a Panzer IV. So it's very early in terms of breakpoints. I think there's going to be a lot of bloody fighting going on very shortly, both at the bridge and at the village. So, folks, that's the situation. What do you think? I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about the game, just let me know. But that'll do it for now, folks. I'll get back to you with the next part of this battle report. Panzer Grenadier Deluxe, folks. It's a good game. So far, I'm liking it a lot. I'll talk to you guys soon.